What's up, guys? Tim Little. Welcome back to TacticalBassin. Today, in-depth frog fishing. You know, I posted that video a couple days ago of me going out and frog fishing. Got some messages, some comments, some questions about frog fishing. So today, a little in-depth video, everything from beginner to advanced. We're talking different types of frogs, the rods, the reels, the braided line, all that stuff in today's video. Let's get started. Frog fishing, it's got to be one of my favorite summertime techniques. You know, as a little kid, going and hopping fences and fishing ponds, you know, going to Kmart and getting those little cheap frogs, throwing them on a spinning rod out there on that grass was some of the most fun I had as a little kid. And today, much hasn't changed. I love frog fishing. It's power on power, and nothing really gets that heart pumping more than a big swirl or a big blow up on your frog, and you're just waiting to jack them. So today we're covering frog fishing. Where does a frog shine? Summertime, that post-spawn time, you know, water's heating up, the grass is growing, those fish are super shallow, they've pulled to the back. Now you have the grass growing up, you got mats, you got all sorts of stuff, right? You can take a topwater frog, a hollow belly frog, on straight braid and fish it through that stuff, and those bass will come up through that vegetation and hit your topwater lure. You jack them and grind them to the boat. It is phenomenal. It's so much fun. Frog fishing is definitely one of my favorite ways to catch them. So a frog really shines in the summer months when the vegetation is up, the water is kind of hard to fish any other open hook bait through. For those that don't know, again, we have beginners to advanced people on this channel, so we try and cover all this stuff for you guys. You advanced guys, stick around because I'm sure you guys will learn something in today's video. But for those that are beginner, a hollow belly frog, it floats. It's got two stout hooks on it, but it's made to be somewhat weedless. So if you run your fingers over this, it's not going to stick. But when that bass bites down on this lure and you jack them, you're going to put those two big old hooks right in the roof of their mouth. So you can fish this stuff through or over some of the thickest vegetation. If you're bank fishing or pond fishing and you know those grass has really come up to the surface and you have mats on the ponds, a frog is probably your #1 way to catch them this time of year. Today I'm going to break it down into 3 different frog categories. Kind of cover your basic all-around frogs. Then I'll get into your poppin' frogs, and then I'll cover some special open water frogs. Frogs that are very easy for kids to throw, something that you kind of cast out and reel back, and the frog does all the work, and it's a blast to watch beginners and children catching largemouth on frogs. So to get started, let's talk about my overall basic frog. This frog you're going to fish through sparse grass, through sparse mats. One thing to realize is that not all frogs are created equal. What I mean by that, some frogs, very soft, smaller hooks, can be fished on pretty much a heavy jig rod versus something like the Bullywah 2. This is a specific frog designed with a keel in the front to make it easy to walk through sparse grass, and it's got a real stout hook on here. So this type of frog, you're going to need an actual frog setup for, you know, a real stout rod, 7 foot to 7'6", depending on how tall you are, but you want an extra heavy rod. I'm going to get into all that stuff later on in this video, but this rod you can tie on a spinning rod with braid, a heavy action spinning rod. You could fish it on a heavy action 7-foot rod, pretty much a universal jig rod you'll be able to fish this frog on. We've done videos in the past, and hopefully the guys that have been following us for a long time, you guys have seen some of our frog fishing edits, some of our epic blow-ups and slow motion blow-ups. If you guys haven't seen that stuff, and if you guys want to get really psyched and excited about frog fishing, I'll leave a link down below for you guys to check those out. But again, frogs They're not all created equal. Some last a lot longer than others, and we have put a lot of them to the test. So I'm going to give you guys some key baits today that if you're just getting into frog fishing, you should check out. And if you're already into frog fishing and you don't have these frogs in your arsenal, add them because I'm sure you will like them. So my number one all-around frog, like I said, you guys that have been following us for a long time know that it's going to be the River to Sea Bully Wah 2. Now this is the number 2. It's got, so they made some changes to the hook, the keel on the actual frog. This is very, very easy to walk. So if you're a beginner, this is a type of bait you're not going to just kind of drag to the boat. You're not going to cast out and just drag it to the boat. It's going to be real soft, real quick rod twitches. And this frog is going to start walking left, right, left, right. It's not like a pull action like a spook or a big walking bait. Just a real twitch, 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 twitch. That frog's going to walk, and this keel that's built in makes it very easy to do. But because it has this real steep V, this real deep V on it, it makes it harder to fish on top of mats because it's going to want to roll to one side and that hook is going to dig in. So if you're just a new beginner getting into frog fishing and you want a universal frog but you're not going to be fishing on thick mats, I would go with the Bully Wah 2 or the Live Target Coppers. This is quickly becoming one of my favorites, if not my second favorite frog to throw. You know, I used to throw the bobbies all the time. This was a great frog, still is a great frog, but you can see how realistic this Coppers is. Very realistic, and what I love about these things right out of the package is how soft they are. By far one of the softest frogs. And what that means to you guys, the softer the material, the softer the frog, when that fish engulfs this bait and squeezes down, those hooks are already sticking me in the hand. And you set the hook, you're going to get a lot better hook penetration on a soft frog versus something that has a little more rigidity or is a little more stiff. But that Coppers, guys, is an awesome all-around frog. So if you just want to, you know, put your feet in the water just a little bit for frog fish, you just barely, you know, you want to test the waters and see if you like it, check out those two frogs. And just like every video, guys, I'm going to cover a lot of stuff. I will link everything I talk about, the different types of frogs, the gear, colors, that sort of stuff down below in the video description. So hopefully you guys can see that right there. You can see the difference, how the Bully Wah has that keel. Again, that's going to make it very easy to walk. But if you're throwing on mats, go away from the Bully Wah and go with the Coppers. Those are my two favorite all-around frogs. As far as colors, we are going to keep it extremely simple. I believe you only need 3 different belly colors of frogs. Something that is chartreuse, a version of black, either straight black or yellowhead, blackbird, and a white. Those 3 colors will catch fish no matter where you are in the country. Depending on your water clarity, depending on how aggressive your fish are, you'll switch between the 3. I really like the chartreuse. Hence the name on this, Little Allen. This is a color that Matt and I designed, that we talked with the guys over at River to Sea and got them to produce this color because it is by far our favorite color. We fish this color 10 months out of the year. Second favorite is going to be a white belly. And then third is going to be black. I really like a black frog, but I have more consistency with the chartreuse and white, getting more bites. I have found that if I'm really fishing for big fish, typically the bigger bites come on a black frog, and the way it silhouettes really stands out. So we talked about my all-around frogs very quickly. Again, the coppers, the river to sea, the snag proof, those are all great baits to start with. Now let's talk about mat fishing. Those of you guys that are fishing cheese patches, that is where you're going to want something with a little more mass to it, a little more weight, something that lets those fish know below that mat that frog is up there. So you want something that kind of compresses that mat a little bit when you're walking, when you're pulling. That's where I'm going to go with either the Strike King Daddy. This is a lot larger frog than, let's say, the bullywall. You can see the size difference. This is really going to show up on the mat better. It's going to put a lot more weight in it, and as you're dragging it through, those fish are seeing the movement. They can't see the frog, but they're seeing the movement, and as soon as you get to an opening in the mat, you pause it and they'll come up and eat it. You can also add weight to the belly right here to make it sit deeper in the water, but the Strike King Daddy is an awesome mat frog. Another frog for mat fishing. This is actually Ish's new fat frog. He came out with this a year or two ago, but you can see the difference between the traditional river to sea bullywall and the actual mat daddy frog. See how much flatter this is? This is going to be an awesome mat frog. It's got a built-in rattle system to it to let those fish know where the frog's at, but again, it's not going to roll over on the mat. Okay, so we talked about your everyday normal frog. We talked about your mat specific frogs. Now I want to talk about popping frogs. These guys right here. You can see I have a lot of different frogs, but I've really narrowed it down to about 5 or 6 different models and a handful of colors. Again, whites, blacks, chartreuses, occasionally a bluegill color. But if you go with those 3 colors or 4 colors, you will catch fish all around the country. So popping frogs, where these really shine is on weed edges. Again, we're not going to fish them up on a mat because they're not going to get through. You're not going to get that real good popping action. But around the edges of a mat or a tule line or a reed line, sparse grass, maybe you have some coontail grass or something like that coming up. It's just under the surface or just on the surface, but very, sparse. That's where I'm going to go with a popping frog. You can pick out those key areas that you think that the fish are going to be sitting. You fire this frog out there and it walks very easily because it's got the cupped face. It doesn't want to move forward very well because it's feeling the resistance of the water. So if you twitch, this thing will just sit in one spot and move side to side. But if you want to change up your cadence or change up your presentation, now you can just do a bloop, bloop, and it will spit just like a popper, but it's weedless. So that is where I like to use a popping frog. If a real small area that I want to target and I want to keep that bait in the strike zone as much as possible and not cover a lot of distance to me, I will go with a popping frog. Some of my favorite popping frogs, this is the Jackal Gavacho. We've done videos in the past on this guy right here, but phenomenal color. That's a bluegill color. Phenomenal patterns. Again, bluegill, whites, blacks. Gonna be my main colors. Chartreuse, those 4 colors. But that is a very special frog. Obviously, the spit and wah. Hopefully you guys have seen our spit and wah video we did several years ago. But again, it's like the bullywah, but instead of it having the normal traditional frog face, it's got a big cup on it and it has holes through it, so it leaves a bubble trail. But that is a phenomenal popping frog. And the Spro. Lot smaller frog. You see this compared to keep it all the same, a bullywah. See, it's a lot narrower. This bait is extremely easy to walk as well because of that long, slender profile. But again, this is more, for me, it's more of a finesse frog. If I'm fishing specific targets around a dock or a grass line, and I don't want there to be an overwhelming presence, maybe I want to mimic, you know, baby shad or bluegill or something, I will go with the Spro poppin' frog. So poppin' frogs, your everyday frogs and your mat frogs, we've covered those. I'm actually going to call the mat frogs heavy cover frogs because you can fish them through some of the thickest stuff. The next frog and the last frog, type of frog I want to talk about is going to be the open water frog. I'm not going to get into toads in this video, like horny toads, rage toads, that sort of frog or toad. That's a different style of bait. We'll do a video on that later on. But I do want to talk about the open water frog. This is the Tackle Sprinker. As you can see, it's got the swivel and the tail on it. This is pretty much a weedless whopper plopper. Fire this out there. Same type of stuff that you're going to throw the popping frog on, but this is going to be a straight retrieve bait, just like a horny toad or a rage toad, but unlike those two, this bait actually floats, so you can pause it. So you can reel and it's plop, 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 pause. Sit there, plop, 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 plop. You can do a lot with this. When you come, you're fishing this through the sparse grass and you come to that choke point or that funnel where you think that fish is gonna be sitting to ambush, plop, 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 pause. Plop, plop, boom. So this is so much fun to fish, and it's very easy to fish because it's just a straight retrieve. So again, you can, I have this bait actually rigged up for my son JD. He's 6 and he's really learning to throw a bait caster. So I don't want him to have to worry about trying to walk a frog. I just want him to practice casting and reel. And this is a very easy bait to fish, very easy bait to catch fish on. And he is hooked. He's out there every morning trying to catch fish on this guy right here. But the Sprinker is a very special bait. It went hog wild a couple years ago, and you know, they're going for like 80 bucks on eBay because they were so hard to get. Another open water frog that I want to talk about. This is a special frog. A lot of people haven't really done videos or talked about this frog very much. This is the Bariski. And it is very stupid looking. Right? It looks like, I don't know, something out of a spaceship or something. I don't know. But the cool thing about this bait, again, is it is very easy to fish. You literally fire this thing out there and you just reel it back slowly, and this thing just dances. It dook, 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 dook. And these little arms right here cup the water, and it just looks like a, I don't know what it looks like. Obviously, it looks like something great because they eat it. Very easy to fish. Again, an open water frog. What I mean by open water, cover frogs, heavy cover frogs, mat frogs, you were throwing into the thickest of stuff and you were trying to get that fish to come up through the vegetation, whatever it is, to eat that bait. These open water frogs, you're not necessarily targeting a specific mat or a target. If you have the grass just under the surface or just on the surface, but it's sparse, again, just like the poppin' frog or the frog that you're trying to walk, this is going to go through that same stuff just quicker. So if you want to cover water quicker and trying to find an area that holds more fish, go with an open water frog. Again, fire it out there, bloop, 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 bloop. Just cover water until you get it blow up and figure out where those fish are. Again, totally different type of sound, totally different style, presentation than the other 2 or 3 types of frogs. But this is a very special category because I don't think the fish see it as much. One tip for fishing these open water frogs, you'll find that if you actually fish these with your rod tip up and you get that blow up, you guys know, we teach in the past that if you're walking a frog and you get blown up on, jack them as soon as possible. Don't wait. You know, there's a lot of different opinions on that, but for myself, and Matt, we 100% believe as soon as you get bit and that frog disappears, jack them. Not so much with these guys. You know, this is covering water a lot quicker than walking a frog, covering a lot more distance to you. So I found you are reeling this with your rod tip up like a 45-degree angle. When you get bit, you drop and jack them. That reaction time, that 1 to 2 second drop set, gives that fish enough time to engulf. That is very important, especially on these style of baits. Also apply that to your toad fishing, and you guys will put more fish in the boat, or your bite to hookup ratio will go through the roof. Rod tip up, blop, 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 bite, drop, set, and you'll get them. Okay, so frogs. So we talked about frogs, we talked about colors. So again, just a little refresher. Your everyday frog, go with the coppers. If you're gonna be fishing through some, on some light mats and through some thicker vegetation, and the Bullywah 2. Those are my two go-tos. Snag Proof is also a great frog. Mat frogs, we're gonna go with the Strike King, the King Daddy, or the Fat Mat Daddy. That is a mat specific frog, a heavy cover frog. Open water or beginner frog fishermen, go with the Teckle, the Sprinker, or that style of frog. There are some other models on the market, but that one is tried and true. Also, all these frogs besides the Strike King, the King Daddy, you know, that giant guy that I was talking about, are typically gonna be a 65mm frog. They're all pretty close to the same size, but they are available in smaller sizes. See the little itty bitty coppers? This is perfect for throwing on a spinning rod. You want to finesse them, go with something like this. It's easier for the fish to get them in their mouth, but 99% of the time, 99.9% of the time, I'm going with a 65mm frog with whatever brand or model it may be. But kids or spinning rods, wives, something like that, that you want them to throw a little smaller bait, a little easier bait to throw on a spinning rod, you can go with a little guy. All right, let's talk gear. So frog fishing, topwater fishing, it's one of those techniques that you don't necessarily need the nicest or most expensive equipment, right? Because it's visual. You don't have to feel that frog bite. You don't have to feel that frog blow up. It's happening in front of you. So any of your 7-foot to 7'6" extra heavy. Now, Matt, he's a couple inches taller than me. I think he's like 6'2" or something. So he can actually frog fish, walk a frog with a 7'6" rod. Whereas me, that's just a little too long. When I'm walking the frog, the tip is slapping the water and I don't like it. So the longest, I'm 5'11", 6 foot, so the longest that I use is a 7'4". That's about the longest I can use without hitting the rod tip on the water. Kids, women, smaller people, you can get away with like a 7-foot extra heavy or 7-foot heavy. That will help them with their technique of actually walking the frog and their hookup, their bite to land ratio, and it won't be so hard on their shoulder and elbow and wrist all day walking that frog on that longer rod. So my absolute favorite rod for frog is going to be the 7-foot 3-inch extra heavy X Pride. That rod is phenomenal. Up until, I don't know, a year or two ago, my favorite frog rod was the Dobyns Champion. It was the 736. That rod is phenomenal, but I actually like the Champion Extreme 746 better. Again, this technique is not a technique where you need to go out and buy the most expensive rod because you need that sensitivity. What you're paying for is power and strength. You know, when you're setting on 65-pound test braid on an 8-pounder back over some toolies, you don't want that rod snapping. So those two rods are phenomenal, that X-Pride and that Champion Extreme. Also, the SLX, a little budget rod, the 7'2" extra heavy. I frogged on that all year last year and never had an issue, and that rod held up. I really like that rod. So, average size guy, 7'2" to 7'6" extra heavy rod. You want to be able to jack those fish and get them out of that cover, get them out of that grass. Even if you're fishing sparse grass, when they eat that frog and get down into that stuff and you're trying to pull 15 pounds of grass along with your fish, that's where that extra heavy and that stout rod really comes into play. So there's the rod lengths. Again, I'll link some of my favorite models down below in the video description, but every brand, you know, whatever brand specific you guys are, whatever brand you like, I'm sure they have a 7'2" to 7'6" extra heavy that will be phenomenal for frog fishing. You guys that are just getting into frog fishing and want to try it out, you know, go with the coppers, go with the snag proof, something with a little bit lighter hook that you can fish on your 7'4" heavy action jig rod. You know, you can fish this on that rod. You don't have to go out and get frog specific gear. But if you're going to step it up and go with the Bullywah 2, where much stouter hook, you're going to need that frog rod and frog reel and line. Reels, I typically throw it on a burner, a 7-1, 7-3-1, something like that. I've tried it on the 8-to-1s. The biggest thing is that torque, right? When you have speed, you lose torque. I like the 7-to-1s. I haven't had any issues jacking that fish and then pulling them out. You know, no drag issues, anything like that. You need to be able to turn that handle. You don't need to lock up. So that 7-to-1 for me, 7-3-1 has been the best for me. I know some guys throw it on 8-to-1, but I feel like you're gonna lose power a little bit. So 7-to-1, 8-to-1, and you're gonna throw braid. 9 times out of 10, I am throwing 65-pound test braid. Now, it's not that a 4-pounder or 5-pounder can break 65-pound test. It's when you set that hook into that fish in that mat that's behind or through all of that grass, you need that braid to get that fish out. Or if it's up and over a limb or something like that, you need to be able to get that fish up and over that tree branch. So it's not that you need the pound test for the fish itself, but you need it for everything that comes along with that fish. If you're fishing open water, like the Tackle, I will go down to 50-pound braid. A little smaller diameter. That smaller diameter lets me cast farther and cover more water. What I will say with this guy right here, I actually use the longer rod. You know, I told you before I had an issue with the 7.6 walking because it's so long and the rod tip hits. Again, this one I'm fishing with the rod tip up. Fire it out there, start reeling. I have that rod tip up. I get bit, I drop, I set. I can get away with a 7.6 rod. It plays the fish better. I cast farther. So if you want to try that one out, try it out on a little longer rod. Frog fishing is one of my favorite ways to catch them. There is so much to be said for a 5-pounder, a 7-pounder, a 9-pounder coming through grass and your frog just disappearing. You reeling down, your braid cuts through the water, and boom, you jack them and you're loading up, and then it's just power on power. Nothing comes out and tail walking. There's nothing like power fishing. A frog is the absolute top of the line for power fishing for me. And if you guys take these tips, try out these specific frogs, I think you guys will enjoy frog fishing. You know, there's so many cool frogs on the market. Last year I did a video, top 5 frogs that you didn't know about to throw. I'll link that too down below in the video description, because there are some specialty frogs that have their time and their place. But for now, these are my workhorses. You know, my everyday frog, my heavy cover frog, and my open water frog. Between those 5 models and those 3 or 4 different colors, they are going to do it for me. One other frog I do want to talk about, because I think it's special, is going to be this guy right here. Another frog by Teckle. I will link it down below in the video description, but you can see instead of the plopper tail, you know, the swivel with the tail, you have some metal feet that spin and clank. Again, sound a little bit different, look a little bit different than the guy in front of you throwing a frog, and I think that matters. So sometimes get out of your comfort zone and try funny, unique looking stuff. But this guy right here is another frog that I think you guys should try out. I think that's it, guys. Again, if you try out these frogs, you stay specific to your colors, your whites, your chartreuses, your blacks. You know, play around with it. 9 times out of 10, I start off with that chartreuse frog. You know, something about moving quickly. I don't know if it's matching bluegill or they can see it better the way it silhouettes. That is my #1 frog that I start with. If I'm not getting bit on that, or I feel like it's too much, I will go with the white frog. Again, real easy target for them to see. A lot of times frog fishing, they will miss. As they blow up on your frog, they will miss. And you know, that white frog, I think they can see it very well. And if I'm not getting bit on that and I want to change it up, then I will go with an all black frog or something like the yellowhead. Again, you're not trying to necessarily mimic a frog. You know, yellowhead blackbird, there was an Elite Series one on Havasu where I believe Aaron Martins was catching them because they were eating baby yellowhead blackbirds or baby blackbirds, and he figured out that pattern. But bass are ferocious. They will eat pretty much anything that moves. I don't care if it's a rat, a snake, a bluegill, or whatever. They will eat if it moves. So a frog imitates all of those things. So don't get caught up too much on color. If you stick with those types of frogs, your everyday frog, your cover frog, your open water frog, and your poppin' frog, get a couple of each, try them out, and I think you guys will have a blast this frog fishing season. If you guys have any questions, please leave those down below in the comments section. You know, Matt's back east, traveling around, trying out all those new lakes, but we will try and get to those as soon as possible. We read them all. We can't necessarily get to all of them. We get hundreds a day, so please bear with us, but we appreciate you guys. We really do. If you guys learned something from this video or you like this video, please give us a thumbs up. And remember to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. That way you guys know when we put out a video. If you guys don't know already, we put out videos Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and sometimes extras. 3 videos a week for you guys, strictly teaching. If you guys have any questions, again, leave those down below in the comments section. As always, guys, we appreciate you. Have a good one.